Okay, this is the dedication page with Blanche of Castile and King Louis IX of France. This is actually a page from the Bible Moralisé. This isn't actually the king or obviously the queen. The themes for this is objects of wealth and ritual. And after about 1250, architectural activity declined and the demand for stained glass slackened. But the need or want for illuminated manuscripts continued. And the guilds had been formed and now creating illuminated manuscripts for nobility as well as for the church. And so the division of labor had been created in being able to make illuminated manuscripts. So some people did the calligraphy, others did the illumination, and they had this assembling nature in the production of the books. The Bible Moralisé were generally commissioned by the members of a royal family, as nobody else would have really been able to afford such a luxury. They were the source of instruction, and so they used these books to be able to educate royal members of the household in 13th century France. And so in 1226, the French king died, leaving his queen Blanche of Castile to rule the kingdom until their son Louis IX came of age and finally ruled in 1234. Blanche commissioned this work to serve as a model for kingship and as a religious guide for her son, who was very young at the time. As a member of the royal family, Blanche could have organized and afforded, the best artists in court. The 13th century illumination was both dazzling and cutting edge and quite lavish. You can see the background on this is all burnished gold, which means that they've taken a tool and they've rubbed the gold so that it shines like this. They are seated underneath this trefoil arch, which is very Gothic in appearance. And the buildings behind them is indicating that they are at a... This was the Capetian kingdom, so most likely they're sitting in Paris, or at least that's what all these buildings in the background are indicating. The upper register, which is what this is, depicts the enthroned king and queen, Blanche of Castile, and her son, who was young at the time. He's beardless, and so he's king, and he's there, and he's crowned, but he's not actually acting as king until he's old enough. So both wear the traditional open crown top, the fleur-de-lis, which is a stylized iris and symbolizes the French monarch, both in religious and political rites. So this is very typical of the medieval period to wear this open crown. She is wearing a white headpiece, and she's also wearing fur. You can see here the edges of it peeking through underneath here. She wears a pink tunic, which spills out over the edge of the border there. And there's this green column that divides the two. And it's a deliberate gesture across the way, with her raising her hand in his direction. Louis IX wears an open crown also of the fleur-de-lis and glances back at his mother. In his right hand he holds a scepter, and on top of that scepter is a little bird. You can see better moving to this slide. The four-petaled brooch, which is holding up his cloak, has a sapphire in the middle of it. So it's really quite ornate. In his left hand he holds a golden ball or a disc. It has been suggested perhaps it's a coin that follows with his coronation. We know that his coronation was in 1226, and so it only makes sense that perhaps this is what this is indicating, and that even though he was 21 in 1235, probably an indication that this is the coin that would have been stamped for him for his coronation. Queen Blanche and her son echo a gesture and pose that would have been familiar to many in the Christian iconography. It's not exact. Obviously, he's not sitting on her lap and he's not a baby. But we recognize this as her sitting in a chair, maybe a throne, as we would the Virgin Mary. In the bottom register is the cleric and the scribe, or illuminator, and they are depicted below here. The cleric is on the left, and he wears the sleeveless cloak, which would have been appropriate for divine services, for Mass. He is an educated man, and his emphasis is his role is emphasized as a scholar in what he's writing or what he's reading. He tilts his head forward and points his forefinger to the artist across from him as though he's giving instructions and telling the artist how to write or what to write. And on the right is the artist, and he's wearing a blue cloak and wearing a cap and is seated on a cushioned bench. And he's a little bit more colorfully dressed with the orange or the red below with the blue over the top. And he's holding a knife, which indicates a stylus of some sort. And so he's at work. He's making the art that, to make an illuminated manuscript. And so you have a handout that I want you to cut apart and put these in order so that you can keep the narratives correct. You can get the stories right.